everybody. Happy Monday and welcome back to the Joy Factor podcast by Grace Bible Church. I'm your host, Christie Garland, and today I get the privilege of being here with one of my closest friends, Star. Star has attended Grace Bible Church for around about 2 years. She actually was in the same pizza with the pastors that I was in when we both joined. So that's really cool. I remember sitting across the table from her and having a conversation. She is originally from New York and she was in the Marine Corps. She's done so many amazing things, and I'm so excited for you guys to get to hear her story and for me to even get to hear it again. She got baptized recently here at Grace. I know it's going to be a great episode and I'm so excited to get to hear it. So with that being said, welcome to the podcast, Star.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so just kind of to get started, can you share a little bit of your background with us? Just kind of who you are, where you're from, who your family is, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So I'm Star. I am from Staten Island, New York. My dad is a Marine. I didn't really have much of a relationship with my biological mom. However, I had a stepmother growing up, and I was raised with two brothers. So I have my older brother and my younger brother. And because my dad was in the Marine Corps, we kind of, I was born in Staten Island, but the Marine Corps led us to North Carolina, it led us to California. It also led my dad overseas, so my dad went to Japan for a little bit. So yeah, that's a little bit about, I mean, it varies of where we were and what we were doing, I feel like.
Yeah, so you guys moved around a lot.
Yes.
Was that fun for you, or was that kind of difficult?
I think as an adult now, looking back at it, it kind of stinks because, my husband has childhood friends who he grew up with, and they went to elementary school together, middle school, high school, and I never got that experience just because we moved all over the place.
Right.
So a good portion of my life started here, and then North Carolina, and then California. But then also it comes with the friends that you have when you're in the military and when you're at these bases, they go everywhere else too.
Right.
So there's really no, predicting where you'll go and who you'll meet.
Right.
And I think I kind of ran into that too with me choosing to become a Marine. I've made wonderful friends in the Marine Corps, but they live in Texas and Michigan and Florida. And so, yeah, I mean, pros and cons, I think.
Yeah.
And I guess there's a little bit of advantages with everything.
Right. I feel like sometimes it's hard to see that side of things, especially when I was a kid, if I had friends who traveled around a lot or moved. I remember I had these one friends who moved houses, she was telling me she'd lived in 6 different houses in her life when we were 8 years old. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's literally the coolest thing I've ever heard. But you don't actually realize how difficult that can be.
Yeah.
Unless you experience it.
Mm-hmm.
But can you share with us a little bit about your testimony and how you came to know Christ?
Yeah, so kind of how I said before, I didn't really have a great relationship with my biological mom, and I feel like that kind of starts my story. My parents were teenagers when they had me, which ended up my parents actually got kicked out of high school. That was what they did when you were a teen mom.
Wow.
Which I feel like that's a terrible thing to
Right.
do.
Right.
I feel looking back as an adult now, I'm well, they failed. They failed this person. I feel like a lot of things in her life came from that.
Right.
So yeah, I didn't really have much of a relationship with my biological mom. We did have custody arrangements, I guess. But it was hard for her because she didn't have a stable home. I mean, not only did school kick her out, but her parents also did.
Okay.
So she struggled, and I think my dad was also, removed from his high school at that time, and he was sent to a different high school where the not so good,
Yeah.
teenagers were. And from there, he joined the Marine Corps. And that kind of led our, travels. But from there, it even made it more difficult for my mom to have a good relationship with me,
Right.
because she didn't have the ability to travel to North Carolina or California and keep up with me and everywhere we were going. But at that time, my dad met, my stepmother, and she actually had a son, and my dad had me. So that's kind of how we kind of blended,
Okay.
and that's my older brother. And then when we lived in North Carolina, they had my younger brother. So, yeah, we didn't grow up much in the church. I will say, like, when we kind of came back and settled back in New York, we were more of like a Catholic, safe family. So my brother and I, we went to Sunday school. We did our communion, and that's really, it was just something to check off on the checklist, I feel like. We had to get baptized. We had to do a communion. And once we did it, it was kind of like, okay, we did it. That's it. I would say it wasn't until I joined the Marine Corps that I personally sought faith in Jesus. So when you're in basic training, you have an opportunity to go to a mass, whether it's Christian or Catholic, whatever it is. And that's kind of like your time away from, the drill instructors and just the chaos.
Yeah.
Like, they can't bother you there. So you're like,
Right.
okay, I can
Some
take a
peace,
breath.
finally.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, like, I think we all kind of just, everyone goes to church. And if you don't go to church, like, you go next week because it's an escape. And I think I really, really leaned into that escape. I remember my dad, before I actually left for boot camp, he gave me a cross. And they tell you not to bring anything, but you can bring like religious, items and things. So I brought it. Well, I lost it.
Oh.
And I remember, like, I in the beginning, like, you can hear people, crying or praying, and because it's hard. It's 12 weeks away, and I lost it, and that was the only time that I cried. Like, I sobbed because I just felt like I lost a part of, my family, or yeah, so that was very, very, like, I remember that. And I think I even wrote home, like, I lost it. I can't believe it. You told me not to bring it.
Aw.
But yeah, I definitely really leaned into faith at that point because it's hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is so hard. And I think a lot of my story has to do with the Marine Corps because going to basic training at 18, I think I was 18 years old. I tried college a little bit, wasn't for me. So I decided, okay, I'm going to try the Marine Corps. My dad was a Marine, and that's kind of what I grew up in. So yeah, I think, the Marine Corps is, I don't know if it's all branches, but at least the Marine Corps, their purpose is to break you down as an individual and build you back up as a part of a unit.
Yeah.
And it works really well for the Marine Corps and for, war and fight, its purpose works well for what it's meant to do,
Right.
but not in everyday civilian life
Right.
because you lose who you are.
Yeah.
And I definitely feel like, I made it through basic training and I accomplished what I wanted to. And it was probably the proudest day of my life besides my children being born. But yeah, it led me down a path of who am I?
Right.
And at 18, I feel like even at 27, I don't know who I am.
Right.
So yeah, that was really, really challenging. So I finished basic training, and then you have your combat training, which is a month long, and 4 weeks. You have, I believe, 3 different hikes.
Okay.
So you get like your full combat load, your flak, your Kevlar, your rifle, all of your things, and you go for 3, 6, 9 miles. Well, on our 6-mile hike, I woke up that morning and I could not stand.
Oh my
I
gosh.
couldn't put any pressure on my right leg without falling over.
Oh my goodness.
And we had to do a 6-mile hike that morning. So I was terrified,
Yeah.
but also I had like leadership position.
Okay.
So I needed to do it. I couldn't just not. So I tried. I did it. I finished it, but I didn't finish it without like literally taking off every piece. Like I would take off my rifle and pass it back to my squad. I would take off like my Kevlar and pass it back because the weight was just so overwhelming on my hips that it hurt so bad. And then like I would start to fall behind and fall back, and there's always like a safety vehicle in the back of the hike. And I would get so close, but if you reach that safety vehicle, you have to redo the whole thing.
Oh my gosh.
So they're like, we're going to keep you going. You're going to finish so you don't have to redo it.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, great, yeah. But not when you are, in so
that
much
much pain, yeah.
Yeah. So I had, and then there's like the company commanders and, first sergeants or, the higher ups are in front of that safety vehicle. And I remember someone, I think it was like a first sergeant or something. So he picked up the bottom of my pack and pushed me for like a mile.
Wow.
Because he's like, I'm not going to let you, fall out, but you have to like get it done.
Yeah.
So I would, fall back and then run with all my pack and then fall back, and I finished it. But I ended up breaking my hip.
Oh my gosh. That's insane.
I ended up with they said it was like a 90% stress fracture on my right femoral neck, which needed 3 screws.
Oh my goodness.
So yeah, I was 3 weeks into the 4-week training. I ended up being dropped that day into a rehabilitation platoon, which there I got my surgery. But I stayed there for 10 months.
Oh wow.
Because I healed from that one, or so they say. I tried again, and then I broke my other one.
Oh my goodness. That's insane.
Yeah. So after the second time, they decided, or I fought really hard because they originally wanted to separate me with a general discharge.
Okay.
So if you don't know about like discharges, the only discharge you want is honorable, because anything other than honorable looks extremely negative on, your life in general from then on. And I was only 18 years old. So I fought really hard to make sure I kind of went above all the people I shouldn't have. But I ended up getting, they call it a physical evaluation board. So all the higher ups in the Navy kind of give you this whole physical and determine whether or not you're fit for service, to continue your service. And I was found unfit and separated, medically separated, after 10 months of being in that kind of just, it wasn't meant for people to be there for 10 months.
Right.
It was meant for people to be there for like 5 days.
Wow.
So yeah, the rules were really, it was hard. It was like, I don't want to be dramatic, but it was kind of like a prison. Like you're stuck there. I couldn't take leave. I couldn't see my family. We did have our phones, but you were only allowed to use them after working hours. So it was just very low morale. And it was really hard because I was this super motivated, I wanted to retire from the Marine Corps, and I wanted to become a drill instructor, and I had all these high hopes and aspirations, and then my body kind of failed me. And I think that really set the course for everything else in my life, is like I didn't have any control over this, which was really hard, because I feel like any human being wants to have control over their life. And this was something that was devastating for me.
Yeah.
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 So after that, I actually had went back home to New York, which I thought I was escaping by joining the Marine Corps. But I kind of just pushed me back. But I wasn't the same person anymore.
Yeah. That's so difficult. And it's so crazy. Like, I can't even imagine dedicating so much of your time and willpower and everything to pursue this and then having that happen to you, like on both hips as well, not even one. So then did you end up with the honorable discharge?
I did,
Okay.
yes. Yes, praise the Lord, I ended up with an honorable discharge because
Yeah.
I fought really, they actually changed like all of their protocols after me because
Really?
I went above some high people and I was not supposed to do that.
Yeah.
Like I contacted my surgeon
Yeah.
and in their roles or whatever, medical professionals come before any higher ups in the military.
Okay.
So my surgeon was saying, no, you cannot give her, a general discharge. She is not fit to
Right.
continue service.
Right. Because
So
I mean, I don't know how it works or whatever, but I can imagine like if you're kind of lumped in with people who just quit or who decide it's too difficult for them or whatever,
Yeah.
when you literally have a huge medical reason for having to stop, that must be so difficult. Like,
and that's a lot of what that platoon was. So there was 3 different platoons in the company.
yeah.
It was called Lima Company, and I'll never forget it. But first platoon was people getting better.
Okay.
So in physical therapy, actively working towards going back to training.
Right.
And then once you moved to second platoon, that's when you had your physical evaluation board. You were going to get separated. And then third platoon was the legal platoon. So these are all of the people that are under investigation.
Oh, wow.
They called like NJPs. So it's like kind of like a reprimand in the military.
Okay.
So it was the not so good people. A lot of these people were malingers. So they were kind of, like you said, like not faking, but kind of faking an injury.
Right.
Because they just didn't want to do it anymore.
Right.
There was some people that went AWOL, which just left, like never showed up for combat training.
Wow.
There were some people who decided to do drugs on their boot leave. And you got a drug test when you got there, and they came up obviously on drugs or
Yeah.
having had drugs in their system.
Right.
So yeah, it was a weird mix of people that kind of wanted to do it, couldn't do it, but then just really didn't. Like it was
Yeah.
just, and I think that really made those 10 months so much harder.
Right.
Because I was such a and it was crazy because by the time that I left, you could always tell the Marines who entered Lima Company
Yeah.
and were super motivated and really wanted to do it. And then by the time that they left, it was just like you watched their whole persona just dwindle.
Really?
And it was sad. And if you stood there for too long, it affected you for
That's
sure.
crazy. And especially like you said, if so many of the people are coming in just for short amounts of time, like a couple days, couple of weeks, and you're there for 10 months just watching all these people come in and leave and come in and leave, like I can't imagine how like mentally draining that would be.
Yeah,
That's
it was really, really hard. We actually had someone from Lima Company commit suicide
really.
because it was hard.
Yeah.
And I think that's like the only way I could describe it
Yeah.
is just mentally draining and challenging.
Yeah. Did they like have any resources like for mental health or like anything like that, or they just kind of
Oh goodness, no.
really?
Mental health was the elephant in the room that no one wants to make eye contact with in the
Really?
military. Yeah, and I think it's ironic because everyone, on the civilian side, it's like veterans and PTSD and, suicide and 22 and all these things. And I'm like, where was that when I was active?
Right.
Where was that when any of us needed it?
Yeah.
Because we all needed it.
Yeah.
And I think it's just something that's not addressed at all. You don't talk about it because it's a weakness.
Right.
And if you have that weakness, you're not fit. and you shouldn't be here.
That's
Is kind of how it's
crazy.
viewed.
That's crazy. I wonder if that's part of the reason why so many people who come out of it do have like such bad
Yeah,
PTSD and stuff like that,
absolutely.
because it's not being dealt with as it's happening. It's like, oh, wait till you're out and then we'll help you. And it's
Yeah.
like, why don't we start like at the base and like at the
Yeah.
start as people
Yeah,
are
because
going through these
I
things?
think no one wants to accept that it's happening until it's too late,
Yeah.
because it's really viewed as a weakness, and I think that that's the start of it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
start of a much bigger problem.
Yeah, for sure. So, kind of, I mean, talking about mental health and suicide and all this stuff kind of leads into the topic of the podcast, which is like depression and dealing with depression. I know it's something that you've struggled with for a long time. So, can you kind of share some of your journey with that? Like, when did that start? Like, how did you get through it? I
Yeah.
mean, obviously, you're here now.
Yeah. So I think it kind of started when I was younger. I think I really struggled with abandonment with my mom. And I mean, as from as long as I could remember, I mean, she wouldn't come to get me on our scheduled days. Like I remember getting ready, waiting for her, and she just wouldn't come. I think that really started it. But eighth grade and going into high school is when my stepmother and father split up. And I think that kind of exacerbated it a lot, because my dad moved out and he left me with my stepmom. And I totally understand his intentions now as an adult. He didn't want to separate me from my brothers. We grew up together, of course, totally understand. But not when the person doesn't want you, or at least that's how it felt to me, was that I wasn't wanted there. I wasn't her kid. And it almost felt like she was taking her pain from what my father did to her out on me.
Yeah.
So I think I really, really struggled internally with that. And I was eighth grade going into ninth grade when I started cutting myself. I remember locking myself in my bedroom closet and taking the kitchen knife and just taking it out on myself. And I feel like that lasted all throughout high school. And then I decided I want to join the Marine Corps, and you can't do that. So again, I had to cover it up. I had to figure out a way to do it, and I did it. But you can only put a Band-Aid on for so long. I thank the Lord every day that I never cut again. But there's definitely been trials. I feel like the closest I ever got to it again was when I had a miscarriage in 2020. So pandemic baby.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, me and my now husband had gotten pregnant. Complete shock. I think we were together for like 3 years. So it wasn't, I don't know, one night stand or anything like that.
Right.
But we definitely did not have a baby in our future plans at the
Right.
moment. I was
Right.
actually pursuing pre-med at Kent State, and I had all these plans, and then I had a positive pregnancy test, and like 2 days later it was gone.
Yeah.
So I think I really struggled with, my body can't do it.
Yeah.
My body couldn't do it then. My body can't do it now. And that was really, really hard. And I think I prayed and I prayed, please, let me be a mother. I can't not be a mother.
Yeah.
I think especially with what I've dealt with my mother, like
Yeah.
I needed that so bad.
Right.
And 2 months later, I got pregnant with our daughter, who's now 3 and is a little terror. But yeah, I think throughout that entire pregnancy, I just kept repeating, have faith over fear. I have to have faith. If I just surrender and really just, he knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
I think that that's the only thing that got me through that pregnancy, because I was so scared.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine losing another baby, and I couldn't imagine my body failing me again.
Right.
So it was hard.
Yeah. And I feel like with depression and with that kind of thing, it's so easy to blame yourself for things that are completely outside of your control. Like your hips breaking. It's not your fault. You have zero control over
Yeah.
that. And like even having a miscarriage and stuff, I feel like so many women, we actually did a podcast on miscarriage a couple months ago, and just like so many women just struggle so much when they go through that of thinking it's my fault,
What
like
did I do?
my
What did I
body.
eat?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And with all that just comes such a heavy like guilt and like shame and like fear, like you said, and it's just such a toxic and like terrible cycle
It
to get
is.
caught up in.
Yeah, and then I feel like it also led me to even more guilt when my daughter was here, because it's like, why am I so sad? Why this is all I wanted, and why
Right.
is this so hard? I thought this, is supposed to be this beautiful thing. Motherhood's supposed to be wonderful, and breastfeeding's supposed to be so great, and it wasn't. It was
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, that's what led me to postpartum depression. And I know we covered that here on the podcast too, but yeah, it was, you're supposed to want this beautiful experience, and
Right.
it's not always a beautiful experience. Like, birthing a human is wonderful, beautiful, great,
Yeah.
but there's hard times, and I feel
Right.
like no one talks about those hard times.
Right.
Yeah, so definitely guilt. Mom guilt is insane.
Yeah.
I've never experienced anything like that.
Yeah.
But, wanting something so bad, and then you get it, but then you also realize, okay, it's not what I thought it was going to be by any means.
Right, right. And I feel like once you have a baby, especially if you don't have a close community around you, and like you said, like if you've struggled with depression and kind of these tendencies since like 8th grade, like that must have been so difficult to go into motherhood with these high expectations and hopes, and like yes, those are fulfilled, like you have a beautiful daughter, but now you're like alone and struggling and like I don't know, like so overwhelming.
Yeah, I think that it came at a point in like my postpartum journey with my daughter that I contemplated suicide, and I really thought my husband deserves a wife who doesn't struggle this way, or my daughter deserves a mom who doesn't like lose her temper, or a big fear of mine was my daughter seeing the scars on my body and asking me what that is, and how am I supposed to tell her that?
Right.
So yeah, I think once that started becoming like a prevalent thought in my mind, I knew I needed help. And I think immediately I was like, I'll do whatever. I got on medication, I started therapy, and I started coming to Grace. That was really when I started coming to Grace. I think it was actually Memorial Day a few years ago, our first year living in the house that we own now. We're like, well, there's a parade down there. Let's just go. We can park at that church. And we sat right in front of the church. And a month or so later, maybe even a few weeks, I was like, you know what? I'm really struggling. I can't fight this alone.
Yeah.
I need to go. And I remember sitting over there and just crying. I think the first sermon I heard was Pastor Stephen, and everything felt like it was towards me.
Really?
Because I was just in such a need for guidance.
Yeah.
It was incredible. Yeah.
Yeah.
Finding this community has been wonderful.
Yeah. It's crazy how, and like so sad that it's so predictable that the enemy will come in when we're at our lowest points and attack us there. Like you're already feeling discouraged, you're already feeling all these things, and then he gets in and he's like, oh, well, on top of this, like your husband deserves someone better, or your daughter deserves someone better, or whatever. And I think so often in our life we can get to this high point. Like a while ago, and it was a couple of years ago, we did a series in church called Valleys, and basically talking about how in life there's like these huge high points and then these like really deep valleys. And it's always like, I feel like we can be at a point in our life where we're like on top of the world and everything's going so well and we think like nothing could ever go wrong. And then we hit a valley, and that's like in the valley where Satan comes in and he's like, oh, you think it's bad? Like, let me make it worse. Let me attack your mind and your thoughts. And like, if our thoughts and our mind are not filled with the truth and are not filled with like what God says about us and who we really are, like, it's so easy to believe those lies and like get sucked into them. And I don't know, then like you said, I think so often God also works in that, because then you come and everything is just feels like it's for you.
Yeah, everything was so. And I feel like the first month of coming, I was sobbing at every service because I was like, this is all, for me. And yeah, it was, like you said, there's high highs and really low lows. And I think having that strong foundation in Jesus is really what helps you get through.
Yeah.
I think so many times as, young adults, adolescents, children, whoever, in the beginning of your life, you're like, I could do this. Like, I'm totally fine. Like, I can, go talk to friends. I can do all these coping mechanisms you think you have. But then when it happens over and over and over again, and you're 25 and, you get older, you start to experience more lows.
Right.
And you're like, how many lows can I experience with these same coping mechanisms? Like, they're not working.
Right.
I need something more. I need something bigger. And I think he is what's bigger. Like, there's no bigger than God.
Yeah. And it's crazy to like look back. Like, I have some similar experiences, obviously not like all similar, but to look back and like in the moment when you're going through something so awful, it's literally like, what could be the good in this? What good could come from this? But then it's like, if that is what brings you to Jesus and that is what saves you and that is what transforms your life, like, bring it on. You know what I mean? Like, not really bring it on. Like, in the moment, that's not what you want. But like, it's become so worth it. Yeah. Like, when you see where you are and like where God has used that to bring you. So yeah, do you have any advice, or like, what would you say to someone who's kind of experiencing the same thing? So like, for someone who's listening who might be in 8th grade and self-harming, or for someone in any season of life who is just feeling like depressed and alone and kind of going through the same things that you were going through, what would you say to someone like that?
I think you need a strong foundation. I think your coping skills are only going to get you so far before you realize you need help. Yeah. And it's okay to need help. Right. It's okay. Like, I know there's like, that phrase, it's okay to not be okay, or something like that.
Yeah.
Seriously, it is.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like a lot of the times we all need to, or want to, put on a brave face and be able to push through. And, she's so strong. She's able to get through it. And, okay, but really, when you're by yourself, that's what counts, because you have to live with who you are. Yeah. And I think having a strong foundation in Christ is really, it's going to get you the furthest in life.
Yeah. No, for sure. And I think, I don't know, I used to love listening to all the kind of self-help podcasts and reading all the self-help books, and you'd find all of these like practical tips, like, I don't even know if this is true or not, but I remember listening to one about anxiety, and they were saying like, oh, if you find yourself getting really anxious, like, put your hands in a bowl of like warm water and it will just like instantly like calm you down, or something like that. But there's like all these like random things that people say, and it's not that they like don't work, or not that they can't work, but like, I feel like people are so hesitant to talk about like the root issue, and like so hesitant to say like, you need to come to Christ, like you need to know Jesus. He is the one who will heal you. He's the only one who can heal you. Yeah. And like all of these self-help things that people do, like, yes, they can be helpful tools, but it's not going to heal you. Yeah. You know what I mean?
I think it's really funny that you say that, because I'm working in counseling. Yeah. And like all of these self-help techniques are what I tell my clients. Right. But it's unethical to say, you need Jesus, Yeah. So I feel like that's also a trial for me right now that I'm trying to figure out is, how do I offer this self-help and give these techniques, but also be true to who I am and true to Christ and do what he needs me to do.
Right, right. Yeah, I feel like I don't know, that must be a really difficult situation
It's
to be in, to
challenging.
know,
Yeah.
to have to give people advice and not being able to tell them, like, this is the
How
way.
about Jesus?
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like sometimes, like, I actually think Pastor Stephen said something about this in his message on Sunday. Sometimes, like, our lives and just being light to people, like, if people can look at you and see a difference in your life, they will ask, like, I see you're different. Like, what is different about you? How do you have so much joy? How do you have so much peace? Like, where is this coming from? And then it kind of can open the door. But, like,
Yeah, he spoke about sincerity, and I think that really hit me is like, just be sincere with my clients.
Yeah.
Just really listen to them and be that ear
right,
that maybe they don't have anywhere else.
right, right.
And I think being that for them can display what the Lord is needing me to show them.
Yeah, exactly. And I think God has you where he has you for a reason. And like anyone who's listening as well, like God has you where he has you, where he wants you right now. And whether that's in a situation with a job where you can't just share him with everyone, like right off the bat like that, or whether it's a position where you can, like, he has a purpose in that and he has a reason that you're there. And I think he's using you there. So yeah. And just kind of looking back on your whole life and on your story, do you see how God used those trials for good? Like,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. I think as an adult, I am able to look back and say, okay, I went through, XYZ for this reason.
Right?
But it's really hard to be in that moment and be like, there's a reason for this.
Yeah.
Like, no,
Yeah.
I don't want to think that, I
Yeah.
feel like no one wants to.
Right?
But yeah, looking back at it, I can relate to so many different kinds of different types, different, you know, abandonment, veterans, miscarriage, motherhood, all the things. Like, I feel like I have a toe in so many little doors
Right?
of discussions, and I feel like I can relate to so many more people
Yeah.
than if my story was a lot different.
Yeah, yeah. That's awesome. And I think it's so cool how God is using you to reach people and how God has used all those things to bring you to the point where now you can literally share it on a podcast and be like, I struggle with all these things, but God has brought me through and this is where I am now.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much for being willing to share your story today. I know it's going to be a blessing and an encouragement to so many people.
I hope so.
Yeah, yeah. And I just want to encourage like anyone who's listening, if this is something that you're struggling with, if you're struggling with like depression or suicidal thoughts or anything that we spoke about today, like please reach out to us. Like we are here for you. Get help, even if it's not from us, like get help somewhere. But you can email me. My email is in the podcast description, or you can come reach out to someone at the church. We love you all. We're here for you. And yeah, we just want you to be part of our family, and we'd love to hear from you. So thank you guys for listening. Thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.